AMD, man. So did they beat this? Beat stock goes down.
They were on the same path as everyone else. I think they were in line right on earnings per share. But Pat, I mean, that stock was up 20% in a month. It was on a 240% annual growth rate.
I mean, uh they're up $15 since earnings.
Yeah. So the $3.5 billion number, which I think where that comes from, and largely from one really great customer, which we've already talked about today. We don't know that for a fact, by the way. It's just something I believe to be true. But anyways, earnings in line, revenues up. They are the unencumbered number two right now for AI data center chips. And I'm working on an interesting bull case thesis for Intel. Op-ed I'm going to publish in Market Watch. Now, again, I always say it's interesting because it would also be very easy to do a bear case for Intel. But having said that, AMD has a very strong bull case right now. They've got
bear cases on Intel are boring, man. I think you and I were the only two analysts that gave the company even a remote shot, or maybe it was just me. I forget. But
I'm writing the bull case right now. There's some things I'm actually very positive about. I just think, again, there's kind of the being right and being early, and sometimes you can be wrong because you're early, and eventually you become right. And then you and I just have to wait to become right because we were too early when we were right. I think that there's going to be competition. Pat, I saw a very interesting chart that went around this week, and this is relevant to AMD. It was showing GPU market, and I think 98% of revenue right now is going to NVIDIA. 98%. It's a little over, actually. And
by the way, I don't think that's global, but it's definitely the West.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, there's Huawei's and others that have lower end.
I can't wait for Futurum Intelligence to start cranking out this stuff.
Yeah, we got a chipset data that's coming sometime later in the first half of the year.
Can't wait, man.
It's going to be a first pass, and it's going to. The thing about intelligence is it is as much art as science. It is not a perfect. Any numbers you see, you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. The only numbers you can know to be true is most of what gets filed in these earnings reports tends to be right, but the way they file doesn't always give you exact parts, pieces, and volume, so you're still working backwards to try to figure this stuff out. But having said that, the company did really well, Pat. I mean, look, the data center and the MI300 series, I think you saw a forecast in December of about $2 billion of expected. I think we came out at 3.5. She came out at 3.5 in the earnings report. Am I right on that? I'm just trying to remember. And Lisa also was very generous, by the way. Dr. Lisa Su spent an hour with us analysts yesterday, allowing us to basically do rapid fire grill questions. There was at least 3 or 4 good ones in an hour.
I know what you mean, man. Some of the questions are so dumb. I just can't even.
It's like when you have an analyst that should never be in front of the CEO. It's not. And by the way, that's okay. There's that kind of span, but it's like I want to ask a question like about a granular subject inside of a granular business unit about a single niche product.
When you're with the CEO, ask the CEO questions. It's as simple as that.
Well, Lisa is so impressive, though, that there was never one that she didn't actually know.
I know. I mean, you wanted to know the bump pitch on a product 3 years ago compared to this one, she'd be like, beep, boop, boop, beep. There it is.
Absolute rock star. I'm just saying, figured it out. So, the company's got great partner positioning with its data center chips. I mean, again, publicly, Lisa talked about Microsoft, Oracle, Meta, some great ones. And of course, we know that there's some density there as to where it's going. Outside of that business, look, some of the embedded stuff, was a little bit soft. PCs are on the rise, and we're seeing that consistently from all the chip makers now. TSMC's numbers on devices, we saw it in Intel's numbers, we're seeing it in AMD's numbers. By the way, this is going to accelerate. The AI PC trend line is going to be really good for AMD. So that looks very, very good. But I just want to be straightforward, Pat. Talking about anything else but data center right now just doesn't interest anyone. Actually, as I was kind of reviewing the Intel one, they could have beaten in every category by 90%, but that data center number just absolutely ruined it for them. And so right now, the reason AMD is getting that really good bump post after the kind of initial selling was they almost doubled their forecast in a month. Pat. I mean, their GPU forecast went from 2 to 3.5 billion in a month. as these big customers pick up, I think people are just drawing lines on charts. Charting's all BS anyways, like most. So these spreadsheets and charts, but and here's the other thing is I put this out, Pat, and I publicly said this, and I think you would agree with me. Lisa's conservative. So what I'm saying is if she's saying 3.5, you can be absolutely sure that she knows she's got that in the bank. She is not the kind of person that's going to say 3.5 and is stretching. She's very conservative, and I admire that about her. And so and by the way, AMD trades at a ridiculous multiple. It's really.
Dan, do you remember what I called prior AMD earnings and what that number would be back in our pod?
4?
Said 5.
Okay. But to some extent, you might still believe it's 5. She's saying 3.
and the question, very public question, I asked her, is it demand or is it CoWoS or something or wafer?
It was a good question.
And I appreciate that. And she came back very clearly that she needs to see a little bit more before she can make that call. But you heard it here. I said it was going to be 5 prior. It's going to be 5. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't know why. But I do know why. I mean, look at all of the product that NVIDIA is shipping and look at all the product that NVIDIA can't ship. Okay. There's so much demand out there and the software ecosystem is in place for CSPs. It just is, right? You go Python, PyTorch, you're in. And to AMD's credit, they put a ton of investment in that, and here we are. Let me do some comparisons too, for your Intel piece. So Intel came in on data center was up 38%. Intel DCAI was down 10%. So we got a 48% swing there. I know those are just me adding percentages together, but it's remarkable, right? On the PC, AMD was up 62%. Intel was up 33%. So yeah, it's pretty clear that AMD grew share, at least on a revenue basis, in both of those areas. But I think even more important are some things that came up on the call, right? They're very clear. They said we gained server share in the data center. Okay. And just because, on a percentage basis, of course, they gain share on accelerators. And a couple other things that came out is that the overall market for CSPs, they did a ton of business in North America, but the market was off in rest of world. I just thought that was interesting. For the first time, AMD talked about EPYC customers doing inferencing on models like Llama 7B, right? That's a 7 billion parameter model they're doing on EPYC. Intel has been talking about this forever. We saw Ampere make a play on this, but is the reality that and nobody likes to talk about it, but I think AMD and Intel need to start measuring the size of this and say, now it's harder because general purpose. Okay, that's why it's harder because it can do so many different things. Probably the final thing is on market share on the guide. They did say that they expect to gain market share in Q1. So Q1 year over year, double-digit increase, and will gain share. That's pretty hefty to make a share call in the beginning of month 2 there. So AMD, good earnings. AMD was the only company that had decent earnings with, by the way, the guide was off and their stock is up if you look across everybody that we're talking about today.